My stepfather tried to sabotage my future just to boost his own son's fragile ego, so I walked away. Years later, they came crawling back. And what I did next? It shut them up for good. Before everything went sideways, before Mark, before Randy, before I had to choose between my future and my family, I had a life that felt almost cinematic. The kind you don't realize was rare until it's already gone. My dad, Robert, wasn't just a brilliant software engineer. He was the guy, one of those early 2000s tech pioneers who helped build the internet we take for granted now. But he wasn't the cliché Silicon Valley ghost dad always on a plane or buried in code. No, he came home every night, no matter how brutal the day had been. I remember this one evening so clearly. I was 10. He walked in past 8 p.m., absolutely beat from a 12-hour firefight with a server crash. Most people would have collapsed, but I was stuck on algebra homework and panicking. So he sat down, eyes red and shoulders slumped, and calmly turned my math panic into a game about coding variables. That's who he was. Present, patient, and kind. Every Saturday we'd fire up this old ThinkPad he rescued from the company's junk pile. He started me with Scratch at 8, then Python by 11. He made learning feel like adventure, little puzzles, challenges, and when I got it right he'd say, "That's my boy." I didn't know it then, but I was getting a computer science degree before middle school. We weren't flashy rich, but we had stability. A quiet suburb near Boston. My mom, Susan, graded English papers in the kitchen while Dad debugged code with me. Friday nights meant sci-fi and pizza. I grew up believing in hard work, in curiosity, in loyalty. And then cancer came for him. It started the way most tragedies do, quietly. My dad, Robert, had been having stomach pains for weeks, and like most stubborn men, he brushed it off. But when Mom, Susan, finally forced him to get checked out, our world cracked open. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 to 12 months. He made it 6. Just 6 months to say goodbye to the man who built every inch of my future, with patience and purpose. Even while dying, he was thinking ahead. He wasn't rich, but he was smart. The college fund he'd started for me got locked down into a trust. He worked with a lawyer, tied every knot, dotted every I. He even wrote me a letter. One I wasn't supposed to open until I got into college. I still haven't read it without crying. The last thing he ever said to me, barely able to speak, was to never stop learning, and to take care of Mom. I was 12. For a while we managed. Susan took a leave from teaching. I dove into my books, my coding, my math clubs. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was my way of pretending he was still with me. Every algorithm, every line of Python felt like I was still talking to him. We found a new routine, quiet but steady. Until she met him. Mark. 3 years after Dad passed, Susan joined some Facebook group for single parents. That's where Mark slithered in. He ran a buy here, pay here car dealership that looked more like a front for a reality show about failure. He came to our house in a leased BMW wearing a fake Omega watch and talking like he invented entrepreneurship. But Susan? She was starved for attention. Teaching all day, grading all night, living in a house full of memories. Mark came in with his slick words, overpriced dinners, and roses from gas station coolers, and suddenly she was someone else. Laughing too loud, nodding at nonsense. Then came the cherry on this disaster Sunday, Randy. Mark's son, 1 year older than me, held back twice. Instagram bio, future CEO, the kind of kid who vapes in the school bathroom, calls himself an alpha, and thinks Andrew Tate is misunderstood. Randy wore designer clothes paid for with money Mark probably skimmed off shady dealership loans. He had this SoundCloud rapper energy, but with less talent and more delusion. Mark moved in after just 6 months. That's when our house stopped feeling like a home. Randy took the room next to mine. Every night, he blasted bass-heavy garbage at 2 a.m. while I was trying to study for AP Calc. He'd go through my stuff. One day I came home and found him wearing my dad's old MIT hoodie. I nearly lost it. But what really pushed me over was how he treated my friends. My classmate Sarah came over to work on a coding project, and Randy spent the entire time hovering, saying things no one should ever say out loud. Then he told people at school she was easy. I had to stop inviting people over. My house wasn't safe. And Mark? Just as bad. He tried to play the wise stepdad act. Kept starting sentences with, "now son," like I'd suddenly forgotten who raised me. He'd rant about how college was a scam and how real men build businesses, all while running a dealership that had more complaints than customers. I snapped one day and told him, straight, I already had a dad, and Mark was nothing like him. The worst part wasn't Mark or Randy, it was Susan. My mother, who once taught girls to read The Handmaid's Tale and stand up to toxic men, was now giggling at Mark's every dumb joke. She started making excuses for Randy. She even started changing. Her voice, her clothes, the way she deferred to them, like she was trying to fit into their con. When I tried to talk to her, to beg her to see what was happening, she brushed me off. Mark's had a hard life, she said. Randy just needs a mother's influence. What about me, Mom? The kid who stayed up with you when you couldn't sleep. The one who fixed your laptop and remembered how Dad made Sunday pancakes. The one he asked you to protect. Then came the biggest red flag. Mark started asking about our finances, our savings, my college fund. He pitched this ridiculous idea about investing in the dealership, said he could triple the money. Susan actually listened to him. Thankfully, Dad had made the trust airtight. Mark couldn't touch it. But that didn't stop him from trying. He'd plant little seeds. James should take a gap year. College doesn't guarantee success. We could make him a part owner. I stopped feeling like a son and started feeling like a target. Then, the worst thing, Susan started erasing Dad. His books disappeared. His MIT sweatshirt, the one she used to wear while grading papers, was gone. The framed photo of him holding me after a science fair, replaced by a cheesy family shot of her, Mark, and Randy at a dealership barbecue. She wasn't just replacing Dad, she was trying to replace me. The signs were all there, Mark watching me too closely when I talked about schools, Randy mocking me whenever I brought home an award. Susan growing colder, more distant, more aligned with their hustle family aesthetic. They weren't building a new family. They were burying mine. And I knew, deep in my gut, that something worse was coming. Something that would make all of this look like the calm before the storm. While Mark and Randy were busy turning our house into their personal circus, a late-night echo chamber of hustle culture buzzwords and terrible trap beats, I was on a mission of my own. Survival, escape, transformation. Call it what you want. For me, it was about honoring my dad's legacy and refusing to let his hard work be the fuel for someone else's delusion. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., not because I wanted to seize the day, but because I wanted to avoid Randy in the kitchen. There's something about watching a guy in boxers dump half a box of Lucky Charms into a bowl while bragging about his new dropshipping scam that kills your appetite for both food and ambition. School became my sanctuary. I'd get there by 6:45 just to spend some uninterrupted time in the computer lab. Sure, the computers were relics, but they didn't sneer at my ambition or steal my notes. Mr. Rodriguez, the janitor, would always let me in early. Sometimes, when he noticed I hadn't slept much, he'd slide me a coffee with a quiet, "Keep going, kid." I never said it, but that man was one of the first people who made me feel seen in a long time. My schedule was brutal. AP Computer Science, AP Calculus, BC, AP Physics C, AP Lang. My guidance counselor called it academic suicide. I called it my only way out. I'd rather break under the weight of real pressure than rot under the ceiling of Mark's get-rich-quick philosophies. Stat prep was its own battlefield. I couldn't afford prep courses, so the public library became my second home. Mrs. Chen, the librarian, would sometimes forget to announce closing time if she saw me in the back corner still grinding through outdated SAT prep books. I didn't care that they were from 2015. Math hadn't changed, and neither had my determination. My first practice score, 1380, not bad but not enough, so I went harder. Weekends meant full-length practice tests, and then hours of reviewing every mistake. I made flashcards until my fingers cramped, and finally when the real score came back, 1580, I locked myself in the school bathroom and cried like a kid who just saw daylight after years underground. Of course, Randy called me a tryhard. Mark rolled his eyes, but I didn't flinch. Every time they mocked me, I looked at the photo of my dad at his MIT graduation and imagined him whispering, "Keep going." My extracurriculars weren't padding, they were therapy. I ran the coding club, led the debate team, and taught digital safety to seniors at a local nonprofit. Yeah, old folks learning how not to get scammed online. From a kid living in a house run by two con artists, the irony wasn't lost on me. I even picked up a part-time job fixing computers at a local shop, just enough to feel independent, just enough to keep me busy. Susan would leave dinners in the microwave and try to ask about college stuff when Mark wasn't around. But Mark was always around. Ready to interrupt, ready to pivot the conversation back to some guy he once knew who made 6 figures without a degree and had more street smarts than any professor. It wasn't just disrespect, it was erasure. Every time I talked about college, I saw my mother shrink just a little more into the shadows of his ego. And Randy? The dude dropped out of community college after 3 weeks, said the professors didn't vibe with his mindset. He spent his days asleep, or worse, filming TikToks from the dealership, pretending to be a business mogul while peddling used cars with sketchy loans. It burned, watching him waste time while I sacrificed sleep, seeing Susan nod along to Mark's nonsense while I pulled 16-hour days between school, work, and studying, but I didn't stop, because when I was alone in that lab at sunrise, with a broken mouse in one hand and a worn-out notebook in the other, I felt my dad in the room with me. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as a promise. A promise that all this pain, every insult, every sleepless night, every awkward dinner at a table that no longer felt like mine was building toward something. Freedom. And I was going to earn every inch of it. March 28th, 2023. I'll never forget that day. Ivy Day. I was sitting at the public library, AP Physics book open, but my mind nowhere near Newton's laws. My finger kept refreshing my inbox like it was life support. 7 schools, 3 safeties, 3 targets, 1 dream. The dream. The one my dad used to joke about before the chemo, the one we whispered about between lines of code on that old ThinkPad. MIT. Then it came. That email. That subject line. Update on your application status. I misclicked twice before I opened it. My hands were shaking. Then I saw it. Congratulations. I froze. I actually froze. My body couldn't catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Mrs. Chen, the librarian who'd seen me more than her own grandkids at that point, walked over and gently tapped my shoulder. I showed her the screen. She hugged me and cried. She told me she was going to frame my acceptance letter when I won my first Nobel Prize. I laughed, and then I cried too. Not a quiet, cinematic tear, full-on, ugly crying in the reference section. That was the first time in years. I felt light. I called Susan first. She screamed, said she was on her way home. And for one brief hour, it felt like time rolled back. Like when I won the state science fair and Robert had driven us out for ice cream and played jazz on the ride back. She came home dancing, cheap champagne in hand, eyes bright, as she said, "Robert would have been proud." So proud. But that feeling? It shattered the second Mark and Randy walked through the door. They didn't say congratulations. They didn't ask how I felt. Mark just tilted his head like he smelled something off and asked, "How much is this going to cost?" Randy sat on the bar stool and muttered something about me trying too hard. I brushed it off. I told them Robert had left a fund, and I was covered. Mark's eyes twitched. Oh, that money. That should have been the warning shot, that little moment of silence that foreshadows disaster. Later that night, Susan came into my room, eyes red, voice shaky. "Mark has a plan," she said. Those 3 words chilled me more than any rejection letter ever could. Turns out, Mark had been plotting to use Robert's college fund to invest in the dealership. He'd drawn up a whole plan, claiming he could triple the money in 2 years. He'd even made a PowerPoint. I stared at her. "You're asking me to give up my dad's last gift so your husband can chase his failing dreams?" "He's your stepfather," she whispered. "No, he's your steak." The next morning I came down to Mark sitting at the kitchen table, like he was the CEO of some imaginary company. Papers everywhere. Susan beside him, clutching Robert's old MIT mug like it might anchor her to reality. Then he started the slideshow. I swear to God he titled it, "Family Financial Planning, a Strategic Approach to Collective Success." Clip art, stock graphs, phrases like synergy and scaling operations, 0 actual financials. Then the punchline? "So, sport, what do you think about taking a gap year while the investment grows?" Sport, he always used that when he wanted to manipulate me. I smiled, a slow, bitter smile. "I think you're a scam artist with a failing business and delusions of grandeur." Randy stood up in the doorway like he was going to square up. I didn't flinch. I pulled out my phone and opened an email from Robert's lawyer. I'd contacted him the night Susan broke the news. I read it out loud, word for word. The trust was airtight, ironclad. Any attempt to access it without my consent? Criminal. Mark's face turned from red to pale to furious. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he spat. "No, I know I'm not you." I turned to Susan. "What would Robert think if he saw this?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. Then Mark stood, walked over, and dropped his final card. "It's time to choose. Either your son becomes a team player, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The air was thick with threat. Susan looked at me. "Maybe we could find a more affordable school, something closer to home." And that was it. That was the moment I realized my mom had picked him. Over me. Over my future. Over Robert. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, walked to my room, and began to pack. Laptop, clothes, Robert's sweatshirt, all my important documents. I didn't tell them I was leaving for good. I just moved like someone who knew the bridge had already burned. I called Jake. His dad said, "We've got a spare room. Come home." As I walked out that door, Susan was crying. Mark stood behind her with that fake, concerned look he wore like a mask. Randy muttered something under his breath. I didn't even bother to ask what. I looked at Susan one last time. Robert would be disappointed. And I left. You know those movies where the main character gets into their dream school and suddenly everything clicks into place? Yeah, life's not like that. Moving into my dorm was weird. All around me, students were posing for photos with their families, parents crying happy tears, hugging tight, overflowing with pride. Me? I had Jake and his dad, two people who had no biological reason to be there, but every reason that mattered. We unloaded my stuff. Jake helped me set up my desk. His dad gave me one last shoulder clap and said, "Your father would be proud, son," and I believed him. The first few weeks were brutal. I wasn't homesick, not exactly. I was mourning something deeper. The version of my mom that used to grade papers beside me at the kitchen table, who used to say Robert's name like it still lit her up from the inside. That version was gone, replaced by someone who had traded in warm laughter for Mark's empty promises and Randy's delusions. But then, something shifted. It was late October when I got the email that changed everything again. Subject line, internship offer, conditional acceptance. One of the biggest names in tech. One of the few companies where I knew my dad once left fingerprints on early code. I'd applied on a whim, didn't think I had a shot. I opened the offer, read the numbers, read them again. Full summer internship, compensation package that made me dizzy. I ran down the hall screaming. My RA thought someone had died. I guess in a way something had. Every doubt that maybe I wasn't good enough, every echo of Mark's lectures about book smarts. And then, a text from Susan. "I heard from your project manager. I'm so proud of you. Can we talk?" I stared at it for a long time. My gut reaction was to ignore it. I had ignored dozens like it already. Birthday messages, thinking of you texts, even a voicemail on Christmas. But something about this one. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that she'd reached out because of me, not through Mark. Maybe I was just tired of carrying the weight of silence. I responded, "We meet on my terms." We picked a small cafe near my new apartment. I chose it carefully, public enough to keep things civil, private enough for truth. I was there first. She arrived 10 minutes late, looking older, thinner, her hair pulled back like she was trying to hold herself together. And she was wearing Robert's MIT sweatshirt, the one I thought Mark had thrown out years ago. She sat down, and for a few moments we just sipped coffee. No words. Just shared air, shared silence. Then she said it. Mark left. I nodded. He ran up debts, gambling mostly. The dealership collapsed. Randy moved in with some crypto bros in Florida. I lost everything. I didn't say anything. She continued. He never wanted to invest your college money. He wanted to pay off loan sharks. That trust saved you. Saved me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and say, "You chose him. You watched him gut our home and stood there." But I didn't. Because I saw something in her eyes. Something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. Real, unfiltered shame. Then she pulled something from her purse. A letter. Robert's handwriting. Dated a week before he passed. He'd written it to her. It said, "Susan, protect our son's future. If I can't be there to teach him, help him stay on the path. Don't let anything, anyone, pull him away from the life he deserves." She broke down. Right there, in the middle of the cafe. Not the manipulative tears I remembered. This time they were raw, messy, honest. "I failed him," she whispered, "and I failed you. But if there's still a way back, I want to try." I reached across the table and took her hand. It didn't feel like forgiveness. It felt like surrender. Like letting go of years of resentment so something, anything, could grow in its place. We started slow. She called once a week. I updated her on my internship. She told me about therapy, about a part-time teaching job she picked up near her new apartment. One day she asked, "Do you think you could teach me to code?" I laughed. It wasn't sarcastic. It was surprised, delighted. I said sure, but only if you promise not to turn into a SoundCloud rapper like Randy. She rolled her eyes and said, "Deal." Sometimes now, late at night, we'll hop on a call. She'll share her screen and I'll walk her through a beginner's Python assignment. It's weird, beautiful in a crooked kind of way. She's learning how to build again. And so am I. I still keep Robert's letter in my desk drawer. I read it on the hard days. The days I question whether this road is worth it. Whether breaking away from your own mother makes you cold. or brave, or I think about the man who used to show me how variables worked using Lego pieces, about the nights we sat coding side by side while Susan graded essays, and I remind myself that I didn't walk away from a family, I walked toward a future. Mark and Randy, last I heard they're trying to launch some NFT startup out of a garage in Orlando. I blocked them years ago, good riddance. My mom? She's a beginner coder now. She still messes up indentation, still forgets where the curly braces go, but she tries, and for that, I'm grateful. As for me, I'm not done building. I'm not done honoring Robert. Every line of code I write, every server I deploy, every time I sit at my desk and feel the sun hit my face through the window, I remember why I fought so hard to get here. Not just for revenge, not just for escape, but for legacy, and love, and freedom. If this story spoke to something deep in you, maybe a chapter of your own life that felt too hard to explain or too painful to share, you're not alone. Stories like James's remind us that strength doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looks like stepping away so you can finally breathe. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, protect your future from the very people meant to guard it, or find the courage to say enough, we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us, what boundary changed your life for the better? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you want more stories that peel back the layers of family, betrayal, healing, and hope, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you don't miss what's coming next. We've got more real, raw, and redemptive journeys ahead. Thank you for being here, thank you for listening, and above all, thank you for choosing your own peace.